what we tend to do is just push through them. It's the pushing through that is damaging. Those life events that happen to us, it's going to happen, my friends. There are things that we're going to have to face in our day that are hard for us to do. Hello, and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and today is going to be a great day. Today, we are talking about something that no one ever talks about. We're talking about microtrauma that you, as a dentist, as a healthcare provider, as a server of our incredible human bodies, taking care of other people, the microtraumas and the anxiety that your work triggers in you. Maybe you've had this feeling for a while that there's something about going to work that just gives you anxiety. Your body is telling you something. Your body is telling you that there are microtraumas that you have just been pushing through. We don't talk about this enough in our profession. We talk a lot about dental anxiety. We talk about white coat syndrome, patients coming into the office as doctors or dentists with a certain level of trauma, historical trauma, anxiety for what they're about to go through in your office, maybe some historical stories that have been passed down from generation to generation, or real life experiences that puts them in this increased level of anxiety and fear. But we don't talk about how that has impacted you as a provider. We don't talk about that increased level of anxiety every day when we walk into the office. We don't talk about the fear and the trepidation that increases that stress level just incrementally, and it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. I'm sure you've heard that expression. It's this ignoring our bodies that puts us at a very big disservice to ourselves and to our community. So that's what we're talking about today. That is the big dirty secret of our profession, is that some of us have been traumatized in the past in our profession, and simply walking through the door, we're stressed. And we're treating patients, treating our teams, treating our families, not just clinically, but emotionally and interrelationship-wise, with this base level of stress and anxiety. This just about tore me apart in practice when I ignored it. And I think that's the common theme here, is that we're so good at showing up every day. We understand what it means to show up despite fear, to show up despite discomfort, to show up despite being tired or overworked. We know what it's like to just be there, push through the pain. And what we don't recognize is when we're doing so at a disservice to ourselves and to our patients and to our families, most certainly to our own happiness. You know, recently I went to the chiropractor. She's helping with my elbow. And before she started creating a treatment plan for me, she did this fascinating assessment of my stress level and how I recover from stress. It was really interesting. And she put all kinds of electrodes all over my body and measured my skin temperature, my heart rate, my brain waves. It was fascinating. And one of the tests she did to assess my recovery was, she said, I'm going to play some sounds that are very stressful and stressful for everybody. And so don't be afraid if you're feeling a little bit anxious when they get played. And then at the end of playing these noises, we're going to look at all your indicators and see how you recover from that stressful sound. What's the first sound she played? And I'm sure you can already imagine this. Right before she played barking, snarling dog and screaming, high-pitched child screaming in pain, she played the sound of a dental handpiece. You know, in that moment, I realized we are putting ourselves every single day in these situations that incite microtraumas and elicit triggers that we're not even paying attention to. And I laughed when she did this. I said to her, "Oh my gosh, do you play the same sounds for everyone?" She said, "Yeah. These are sounds that have been shown in research to increase your heart rate, increase your blood pressure, put you in a place of fight or flight, increase your cortisol levels." And I said to her, this is going to be ridiculous and really interesting because I love what I do. This sound of the dental handpiece in orthodontics means I'm taking off attachments or braces. It means the end of their journey. It means we are celebrating. In our office, we call it Celebraces Day, the day we take off braces. I said, this is going to be interesting to see what my brain waves did because I know that's a happy sound. Wouldn't you know, it showed stress and anxiety on my brain waves, on my skin temperature, on my heart rate. Isn't it fascinating? And every day we put ourselves in the same place. And some of us, dare I say many of us, experienced enormous trauma in our residency programs or in dental school or in medical residencies or medical school. Either it was at the hands of a residency director, which I have heard so many times. Residency directors who have been abusive to their residents. And believe me, I am the wife of an oral surgeon. I know what oral surgery residency is like, but I have heard this from clients of mine who have suffered at the hands of residency directors in pediatric dental residencies, in orthodontic residencies, in many medical specialty residencies. And there is a very significant amount of trauma attached to dentistry in general. And we wonder why so many of us are struggling with happiness in our profession. If for 4 years of a residency program, 2 years of a residency program, you were constantly the victim of emotional and sometimes physical abuse at the hands of somebody who was your director, your higher up, someone you admired, how could you not be carrying with you enormous trauma as you go into work every day? Some of us experienced that trauma with our colleagues. Some of our colleagues were very abusive, and we took on a lot of that pain. Perhaps those microtraumas are from an experience that you personally had as a practitioner. I'll tell you about an experience I had, which was quite traumatic for me and took me quite a while to recover from. In orthodontics, one of the things that we do, and I love about my profession, is we work closely with oral surgeons. And so my husband is an oral surgeon, and we treat a lot of cases together. Orthognathic surgery is one of my favorite aspects of my profession. Really, it is such a joy for me to work with Killian. I love treatment planning with him, and you can hear me going on a little bit of a rampage here because it is one of my greatest joys to be collaborating with him and creating treatment plans and then serving our patients and supporting them in so many ways together and then bringing them to a place of incredible success and beauty and function and relief of pain. Anyway, one of my traumas actually occurred around one of these patients. We had done a surgical rapid palatal expansion. And what that is it just means that we needed to make their top jaw wider. And it was an adult, a gentleman, a really nice guy. And I put in the expander and Killian does the surgery. And then we start doing the expansion, making the top jaw wider over weeks and weeks and weeks. The surgery itself is incredible. Thank goodness I don't do this. Thank goodness this is something Killian does because he literally loosens the whole top jaw from the skull base. It's incredible. My husband is incredible. You've heard me say it before. I admire him and love that man. He's one of the most brilliant men I have ever known, and he is incredible at what he does. He was born to do this work. He's amazing. And thank goodness I don't have to do that. I just get to be the orthodontist. Well, this gentleman came back to my office a couple weeks after the surgery, and we'd been keeping an eye on him and supporting him with expanding the expansion appliance in his mouth. And on this day, the expander had come loose. It had come off of the attachments that I had in his mouth. So when he sat in my chair, I had to remove it and put it back on. But his jaw hadn't yet healed. It was still loose in his skull base because, of course, we were still expanding and changing the shape of his skeletal pattern, literally sculpting the shape of his facial skeleton. And so there was a moment when I removed this expander where I was holding his jaw in my hand, loose from his skull. I'm making this sound so aggressive and traumatic because this is how it felt in real time. It literally felt like I was holding his jaw in my hands, and not just his jaw, but pieces of his jaw, because they were two parts of his top jaw. And I am sorry if this is squeamish for you. This is where my trauma came from. That was the most traumatic incident for me. And let me tell you, it all went well. I put the expander back in. This gentleman is a beautiful, handsome man to this day, and he is completely healed, and his treatment is completed for the past 3 years. But that moment was so traumatic to me. Nobody did anything wrong. It was nobody's fault. A traumatic event happened, and it impacted me deeply. It gave me an enormous stress response that literally, when he left, my body fell to the ground. I remember feeling so embarrassed. I had a new hire assistant, and I thought, oh my gosh, your boss just fell to the ground. It brought me to my knees. I didn't allow it in that moment, but I could have wept. I carried my patient through a very difficult procedure. I held space for him and maintained an air of expertise and confidence to keep him safe, to keep him feeling safe in my hands. He was in no pain. He had no feeling. He was safe, and I had to uphold this for him and push through my fears. But what happened was an enormous visceral body response. And that trauma I carried with me for a while until I worked through it. These are small things, little blips on the radar in our day that happens maybe daily. And what is so dangerous is if we don't pay attention to them. And the thing is, it's unique to each of us. What might be traumatic for you might be easy for me, and vice versa. If that had happened to Killian, it would have been literally no thing. It would literally have been no thing. But if one of my kids vomits, it's traumatic for my husband. He can put faces together and do incredible things, bring his patients back to life when they stop breathing in the middle of a procedure, but have a child start vomiting on the airplane and Killian cannot handle it. It's nothing to speak of his ability, or it doesn't make him any less, doesn't make me any less. It just is an indication that we each have very specific triggers and microtraumas that impact us enormously. And paying attention to them is so important. What we tend to do is just push through them. It's the pushing through that is damaging. Those life events that happen to us, it's going to happen, my friends. There are things that we're going to have to face in our day that are hard for us to do. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you didn't get into business to be miserable. The problem is that people feel that if their business gets busier, if they start becoming more successful, that happiness will eventually set in. But it can actually get worse. This is why I created the Business of Happiness Prosperity Coaching. In this one-on-one coaching, we look at how to redefine success on your terms and re-find the joy and the passion in your dream. Visit me at thebizofhappiness.com and become the happiest business owner you know. In our last episode, we listened to the incredible Risa Williams. Wasn't that an incredible episode? Interviewing her, she had written that book, The Ultimate Anxiety Toolkit, and what a great book that is. But if you'll remember in the interview, she was saying some of us find going to Target extremely anxiety provoking, and some of us putting together a piece of furniture from IKEA is extremely anxiety provoking. What is it for you? Now, why is it so important to know? It's so important because we don't want to just push past it. We want to give ourselves some grace. Sometimes we wake up one day and we think, oh my gosh, I'm in this profession. Am I in the wrong profession? I'm stressed out all the time. I'm overwhelmed. I feel like I'm always running behind and I'm always angry at my kids and nothing in my life is working out for me. Maybe you're just pushing through some micro traumas and not allowing yourself to see them, to acknowledge them, to breathe through them, to work through them, and to find peace with them in your practice. You know, the interesting thing about these traumas is sometimes they don't go away. Sometimes they're traumas that keep speaking to us, and we will get elicited again by something small. Just one little thing will throw you off, and you'll think, oh my gosh, I've worked through this. I've faced this. I've done the work. And why is it impacting me again? And the number one thing to do in that moment is give yourself grace. Because we don't always get over or move on from our traumas. We get to make space for it. We carry it. We learn to live and to practice with it. And sometimes we can thrive despite it. So just because you had a traumatic experience in your residency program doesn't mean we have to turn away from our profession altogether. In fact, it can be an enormous learning tool. But the very first step is acknowledging it, recognizing it, and not simply pushing through. We tell ourselves so many stories, like, I paid for this, I spent millions of dollars on my education, I dedicated decades of my life to this profession. It's so traumatic for me every day, but I just got to keep pushing through. Or we don't listen to our bodies. And we think, I'm just going to keep showing up. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. Or imposter syndrome sets in and we think, if I just get better, if I just get stronger, if I just believe in myself more. But we forget about these micro traumas that are happening to us on a daily basis. And sometimes they're bigger traumas that we just push through. I ask you to just look at yourself and feel if there are some of these happening to you. Could these be impacting your happiness in your career? Could these micro traumas and these fears and anxieties that have just been kind of building up over time be impacting your ability to deliver your expertise, to be your best self for the people who need you most? So how do we know? Well, think about that chiropractor appointment I was telling you about. And know that you can hear and feel your own body. Imagine it as an energetic gas tank. And Risa Williams speaks about this in her book as well. An energetic gas tank. You have a certain amount of energy that you have to use in a day, in a week, in a lifetime. And some events in our life use up more energy. Think about a car. When you step on the gas and you have the music blaring and you have the air conditioner going and you are pushing it uphill, you use more gas, you use more energy, you burn more fuel. It's the same thing in our bodies. When we're in a situation where we walk into the office and the smells are eliciting a certain anxiety and the sounds are eliciting a certain anxiety, maybe the people. Maybe you've had a difficult relationship with someone at work that you haven't addressed, and there's a certain amount of anxiety that person is stimulating within you. How do we know? How can we tell when we don't have a gas fuel tank register on our dashboard, when we don't have it right in front of us? How can we know that we're feeling depleted of energy? Well, we start to listen to our bodies. Those same indicators that my chiropractor was looking for. Are you feeling clammy in your hands? Is your skin temperature showing you that you're stressed out? Perhaps you've been practicing pushing through for so long that you've forgotten what that looks like. Can you notice your breath? Maybe stop during the day and take a deep breath and see what that feels like, because sometimes we're living in this place of shallow breathing that we don't even recognize because we've been doing it so well. You've been practicing it for decades. So giving yourself a moment in the day to pause and take a deep breath. You know those apps on the Apple Watches or on your phone? They're brilliant, reminding you to breathe, because we forget to breathe. But when you can be aware of that shallow breath, that's an indicator you are at a slightly higher anxiety level. You're functioning at a depleted energy level. That little indicator on your gas tank is dropping. And when we start pushing through, that's when we start getting into emergency mode. That's when we start making decisions that are not for the better of our practice, for the better of our bodies, for the better of our happiness. We start putting out fires. Paying attention to your body is the number one place to start healing those wounds and those traumas. And I am the living proof, my friends, that you can do so and still thrive. You heard of how much I love my practice. I love treating patients. I love working with my husband in conjunction with creating beautiful treatment plans to do incredible things with our patients. I love leading my team. And let me tell you, I have enormous traumas from my past, from my residency program, from just self-doubt and fear, and enormous traumas from little things that have happened in my workday that were not my fault, were nobody's fault, but man, were they traumatic experiences for me. So I am the living proof that you can have traumas and you can face them and you can learn from them and you can thrive despite them. In fact, one of the definitions of microtraumas is the little tearing down of muscles to build stronger muscles. So can we imagine these microtraumas that can actually make us better? Not by ignoring them, not by pushing through them, not by just forcing ourselves to push through the day, but by acknowledging them and then giving ourselves grace. And then giving ourselves enormous compassion to refuel. Because the one piece I've left out so far is the refueling. Recognizing you're running on empty is the first step, but then, my friend, how do you refuel? And just like those anxiety-producing incidents are so unique to you, so are the ways that you're going to find refueling of your energy again. Maybe for you, it's buying flowers. I was speaking to a client the other day, and she said, flowers. I said, go home after work and buy yourself flowers. Pick yourself flowers. That seems so small, but for her, it means so much. Maybe it's music. Maybe it's driving with the roof down. Maybe it's finding quiet, giving yourself permission, even if you're a mom and you feel like you've got to get home to your kids. If you know you've been through a traumatic experience at work that day, if you know you've put yourself in a place of depleted energy, don't push through and just get home to your kids. Find a space to give yourself some room to breathe, to reconnect, maybe to ground your feet back in the earth. Give yourself a moment to sit and watch the sunset. Or maybe it's allowing yourself more sleep that night. What is it that brings you a renewal of your energy? What lights you up again so that you can come back from those micro traumas? You know, sometimes I think we fear recognizing trauma because we think they're overwhelming. We think that once we face a trauma, we're going to relive it. And it doesn't have to be that way. And I'm not talking about bringing them out every day again. I'm saying, how do we see our traumas? How do we face them? And then how do we thrive despite them? Not pushing them down, not pushing through them, but seeing them, holding them, recognizing and forgiving and giving ourselves enormous compassion, and then healing from them so that we can be better humans. Be kinder to ourselves so that we can be kinder to others. I see you, and I feel all that you're feeling. I know what this is like. It's time we talk about this more. It's time we share with one another more of our fears and our anxieties so that we can normalize this and support one another through this. Because you deserve to live your passion. You deserve to be happy living your passion. You deserve to follow your dreams. And you deserve to honor yourself when things have been hard so that you can refuel and bring yourself back to that beautiful, powerful, empowered place to care for the people around you. Thank you so much for hearing me today. Thank you for sharing this story. Please share this podcast with your friends. Let's normalize this. Let's let people recognize maybe you've had trauma that has been impacting your ability to be your very best. Maybe you know someone who went through a residency program that was traumatic, and maybe they've been beating themselves up ever since. Maybe they've been feeling inadequate in their profession from a story that they've been latching onto, and might give them permission to release that story. And if you recognize in yourself that you have some traumas from your past and you're having trouble working through them, please reach out. There are so many people in this world who can help you. Do not stuff them down. Recognizing them is one thing, but having trouble working through them, sometimes we need a professional's help. We just need guidance. We just need support. And sometimes we need technique. How to renegotiate those neural connections, those neural pathways, so that we don't show up triggered the minute we walk in the door. Believe me when I say when you feel good is when you can do good. And the opposite is true too. When you're feeling depleted, you cannot be your best self. And you deserve that. And the people around you deserve the best you too. I honor you. I wish you a spectacular rest of your day. And until next time, remember, when you feel good, that's when you can do good. Bye-bye.